Now it's time for panel 2. We're going to be discussing insider threat. The moderator and leader of this presentation is going to be Kristin Judge. She is the founder, president, and CEO of the Cybercrime Support Network. Kristin, take it away.
Thank you, Bradford, for having me again to host a fantastic panel. I'm Kristin Judge, the founder of the Cybercrime Support Network. We run fraudsupport.org, which is a victim-facing website. We help victims to report, recover, and reinforce their security after they've been impacted by cybercrime. So we hope that people will go there, and those that work in technology can use it as a place to send all those people that call you because you know about IT. So send people to fraud support for help. It's an honor to be among this panel here today. We're going to go through and find out a little bit more information about each person. So I'm going to ask them to start giving a 1-minute, who are you? And we'll start with Tony, if you just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Tony Anscombe, Chief Security Evangelist for ESET, a cybersecurity company that has endpoint protection all the way from consumer, all the way through to enterprise with EDR and threat intelligence and network inspection.
Thank you. And Bob?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Mechler. I'm a strategist with Forcepoint. Forcepoint provides human-centric cyber solutions. I've been with the company now for about 2 years, and prior to that, I served about 23 years in Verizon, about 18 of those years as the CISO for Verizon Wireless. So it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. And David?
Yeah, hi, I'm David Telehowski. I'm Principal Security Architect at Auth0. Auth0 is an identity access management platform that really makes it easy for developers to secure their applications and offload the identity stack. I have over 2 decades of cybersecurity experience, primarily in network security, wireless, and also endpoint security.
Thank you. Tommy, if you could introduce yourself.
Sure. Yeah, my name is Tommy Todd. I work for Code 42. I'm a senior strategic SE. Here at Code 42, we help customers address the insider threat risk associated with data exfiltration. I've spent the last 20 years in cybersecurity, primarily focused on data privacy and data protection.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Allan.
Hi, I'm Allan Cox. I'm a principal engineer with CyberArk. I've been with the company about 6 years now, really helping all of my customers out there with their issues around privileged access and least privilege in their environments.
Great, thank you. So we have just the perfect group here to talk about malicious threats. So thank you. We're going to dive right into our questions. I'm going to start with Allan and ask you, how do you identify potential malicious users before there's an attack and then defend against them? So how do we even know they're going to be in there ahead of time?
Yeah, so that's one of the problems that we really face with a lot of our customers is how do we identify when these situations are going to arise? How do we prevent them? So identifying ahead of time is around typically user behavior. So one of our tools looks at threat analytics in our environment. So when does Allan access a server? What time of day? What days of the week? From what IP address? And creates normal baseline information. When we see that baseline information deviated from, we're able to alert on that as an abnormal activity. And a lot of times we're finding that malicious activity is abnormal from normal day-to-day usage. So we're able to try and spot that quickly and easily.
Thank you. Bob, do you want to join in on that question?
Yeah, sure. You know, I similarly, we think about it the same way at Forcepoint. You know, users interact with data on a daily basis to create value for the organization, but we all know that user kind of floats on a continuum in terms of the value they provide the organization as well as potentially the risk that they could bring to the organization. So you need to have that constant analysis and that visibility or that meaningful visibility into what they're doing and what their behavior is as they interact with that data. So there are really 3 key elements, right? And 1 is the visibility. 2 is the analysis, and then 3 is being able to instrument controls based on what you're seeing from a user perspective, being able to step up the level of controls, as they say, in order to protect the environment based on that level of risk.
And that's the defense. And then David, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think defending against malicious users, it really starts with strong authentication and authorization. The objective is really to secure the user's identity before they're even given access. And at Auth0, we process over 4.5 billion authentications a month. And this really a big data set that we're able to continually analyze and provide a risk assessment for each and every access request. And if that risk is too high, we can challenge that risk. We can ask them to step up their authentication, or we can block it entirely. And so as that threat landscape evolves, these kind of adaptive security controls can just help provide a crucial layer of defense to detect those anomalies, stop those malicious users before they even get in the front door.
Great, thank you. And then Tommy, I'm going to throw this one to you. So how do you detect the malicious threats once they've occurred, and then what do you do to mitigate the damage?
Sure, and this really goes back to the visibility concern, being able to understand how your data is being handled within your organization, the different vectors in which the data might have left your organization. So being able to determine, was this a cloud interaction? Was this something that, from a exposure perspective was moved to an inappropriate device? So having that visibility and understanding the context around those events is key, and also understanding the severity of the issue, right? So it might not necessarily be a high severe risk that this particular piece of data left your organization, but understanding that is key, right? And when we look at response, specifically at like Code 42, we look at response as, how you mitigate this risk is really up to your company culture. And it can be as simple or as complex as you want to make it. Maybe it's a mistake that you've detected and you want to be able to have a conversation with an employee, or maybe you want to be able to automate your response in locking down that endpoint until you can do a further analysis of the event.
That's a great point. It's not a one size fits all, which I really hadn't thought about before. And then Allan, did you want to add anything else to the mitigating the damage?
Yeah, so mitigating the damage, one of the most important things about mitigating damage is there's a typical workflow that malicious insiders, malicious outsiders, whoever really go through. One of those things is lateral movement and vertical movement in environment. If we properly control our credentials and environment, and we're able to slow their ability to move around that environment, such as unique complex passwords, zero trust type barriers, credential boundaries, a lot of different techniques that we can use that even if they are able to, say, get into one part of our environment, that they're not able to move into other parts of the environment and cause a lot of damage.
Thank you. Tony, we're going to pull you in here on this one. How do you identify areas where an unintentional insider threat may occur and then prevent the human error from causing a breach? Again, it's all about the humans. We hear that a lot. Why don't you talk to us about that a little bit?
Well, firstly, around 75% of malicious breaches are caused unintentionally. It's human error or human mistake. So it's actually quite a big number. And they can include phishing, which we all see in our inboxes every day, the link trying to get us to click on something and either download or steal credentials, etc., etc. We've all seen those. And they can come in many, many forms. And that's one thing we should always take into account. It can be an SMS message. It can be an email. It can even be a phone call. Which I think sometimes we in the technology industry kind of forget that social engineering can happen verbally as much as anything else. But also, it's understanding where the data is and where it lives, because any company needs to understand where its assets are so that they can actually do the correct risk assessment and make a judgment on what actually needs to be protected. So, for example, in this current pandemic, you've seen lots of employees going off remote working, etc., and even taking desktops home. Not everybody has the laptop. Was it encrypted? Did it have strong authentication on it? If it falls into the wrong hands, is there any risk? What data was on that laptop? So there's lots of things to think about. And then even when that device gets home, has the user got the access to put a USB drive in? What happens when then one of the kids use the same USB drive and you lose focus of where that piece of customer data went? So actually control of the endpoint is really important as well. It's very, very easy as an end user to make that type of mistake.
Thank you. And then Bob, did you want to chime in on this also?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really important question, and I echo everything that Tony just said. I think this particular issue is highlighted given the current state that we live in with COVID and all these people working from home. I've talked to many customers who've had to actually change the role of certain employees in order to support the business. And now you've got employees who are accessing data or systems that maybe they hadn't had to access before. So it's extremely important to continue to do that discovery and understand who's accessing the data, what purposes they're using the data, and where it's going. But I also want to highlight the importance of education. I think, again, given the current state of affairs, it's more important now than ever to continue to educate our users. And I think there are specific tools such as what we offer at Forcepoint that can help you do that. So for example, if someone is working from home and they're attempting to send data up into a cloud environment, be able to pop up a warning message that says, are you sure you want to do this, right? This is potentially against our corporate policy. And then use that data that you collect to target education to specific users and specific departments within your organization to make sure they're aware and continually thinking about security in this new work from home environment.
I think that's a really key support system to have something pop up, because not only are people focused on work, they've got kids behind them and parents and all kinds of things, because they're in a different environment. They can't just focus. So that's great that there's that reminder there, and then you can learn off of it. Tommy, did you want to add anything about the unintentional insider threat?
Yeah, and I want to echo something that Bob mentioned. You know, in this current climate where we're dealing with work from home, you know, collaboration is more important than ever. And being able to share data back and forth to employees that are dispersed all over the world is critical to, you know, not only enhancing productivity, but also to spur innovation. And as a consequence of that collaboration model, the risks associated with mistakes and accidents go up exponentially. When you combine that with, again, education, the lack of education around how to properly use tools, it can open yourself up for accidental exposure. Think about all the mistakes that are made in cloud collaboration platforms where I might have attempted to share this particular piece of data with a specific individual and accidentally shared it with the whole world. So those unintentional exposures are you know, important, and they're also important to understand. So having visibility into those types of components, it's not enough to know that I'm uploading data to a particular cloud platform, but I also need to understand if permissions are being changed or if my data is being shared inappropriately, right, to kind of help remediate some of those aspects.
Well, and people have to think about roles are changing as we're going to remote work. So, you know, you have to take a minute to step back and say, how many roles did we change? Whose roles did we change? And are we making sure that we're securing access? So much pressure on the folks who are, you know, running the security systems in these companies. Allan, did you want to add anything to that about insider unintentional threat?
Yeah, absolutely. And to echo what some of the other guys said, that endpoint with insiders is really, really important, and moving to a model of least privilege on those endpoints becomes even more important as these people start to work from home. And we've noticed this shift, of course, a lot of us have with COVID, where everybody's working from home. They've taken their laptops out of the security of our data center, out of the security of our walls, all our corporate security that we've spent lots of money on and getting all fixed up. Now we're taking those laptops and desktops and we're putting them in our house where we've got insecure Wi-Fi. We've got a lot of different potential breach points from that. And as mentioned earlier, the increase in phishing has, it's just increased dramatically over the last couple of months, because I think these malicious actors have realized that, oh yeah, if I can breach their home network, there's a good chance I can breach their corporate machine as well. So there's the number of attack vectors has just increased dramatically. And from an unintentional insider threat, that's just that many more chances for somebody to accidentally do something that they didn't mean to do that ends up getting us breached. So essentially, we like to take a mode of protecting the users from themselves, right? With policies that say I can't install or execute code on my laptop, on my corporate laptop, that I have not had approved through IT, so it's being blocked completely. Protecting credential stores on the laptops, LSAS, SAMhash, credentials stored in browsers and other places, but having a tool like endpoint privilege managers to protect these endpoints and really stop the users from accidentally doing something that would cause a breach.
Save us from ourselves. So David, I'm going to throw this one at you right now. So let's talk about some solutions. So what can we do to really raise the bar on the level of knowledge that employees should have for online safe behavior?
Yeah, I think this is a really important topic. And I think it not only starts with a security first mindset, but also from the company side to instill a security first culture. And that really means every employee prioritize security, and then they share a joint responsibility for protecting customers, the company, and also each other. So at Auth0, this really isn't just about securing businesses through our platform, but also spreading awareness about cybersecurity. So we have dedicated team members. They're completely focused on advocating cybersecurity awareness, both internally and publicly as well. So we have ongoing security awareness education, internal blogs, webinars. We have mandatory cybersecurity training for updates on latest security policies, what's changed since COVID, phishing, et cetera. And then when Cybersecurity Awareness Month comes in October, we take part in that. We hold global events. We want everyone to stay safe online. And so we're regularly publishing security awareness blog posts, and we even have a personal cybersecurity checklist on our website you can go download just to try to help people out and protect themselves. And I think Bob touched on this too, that it's collaborative. So when we have something internally, there's the security team, there's IT operations, we're all collaborating together to help anybody, whether it's a Slack conversation that says, hey, I received this alert, or there's some suspicious email I got, and everyone inside feels supported to say something if they see something suspicious. And I think that's really all about the culture and what's needed there to do everything we can to stay safe online.
So important that people are willing to tell you when something goes wrong instead of trying to hide it, because it's a lot harder to clean it up. Yeah. So Tony, what do you feel about, like, what should we be doing to empower these team members to make sure that they have good behaviors?
Well, just to further one of the things that David just said, and you mentioned there, knowing how to report it is really important. So every company should have a really good crisis management policy and actually understand, so every employee knows who to go to and how there's a process in place to follow. But to increase that education and knowledge, cybersecurity awareness training is kind of essential, and most companies tend to do this once a year, and it's a tick box event once a year. Under the current pandemic, I would suggest that we should be doing this more frequently, but also couple that with simulation, and not only simulation of sending out a phishing email to see whether employees click on it, but actually run through the entire scenario of what happens if the employee has actually clicked the wrong link, and actually show the employees how devastating that could be to the business, make them understand. The other thing I'd add in here, and I think it adds to the conversation we've already heard about, networks at home and that, is actually take this awareness into their personal life as well. If you can have the employee thinking about privacy and security of their own devices, their own home network, and make them more security conscious personally, then I think they bring that to work as well. So, extend that boundary beyond the corporate barrier.
Well, because we know that if they are a victim of cybercrime, they're going to spend some of their work time getting it cleaned up. So you really can't separate the two. And now they're working from home on the same computer that maybe their kid just played a game on. So this is a conversation that I've been trying to lead for the past 10 years is what you do at work, what you do at home, what you do at school. Good cyber hygiene is good cyber hygiene. And what we would hope that all of you would do is start adding fraudsupport.org to your education and awareness, so that after someone has been a victim, they know where to go to get help. So we're really trying to fill that next step. I'm a bit of a NIST cybersecurity framework geek. So the prevention is to identify and protect, but we deal with more of the detect, respond, recover. Like what happens to the 50 million people after they've been a victim of cybercrime? And we're trying to fill that gap. So I hope you'll check out Fraud Support and let us know what you think. Great discussion so far. So I'm going to ask a question here of Allan and David. How has the insider threat landscape changed now with COVID-19? How is malicious activity changing in frequency and in sophistication? We have to deal with this COVID-19 impact on our cybersecurity. I don't think it's changing anytime soon. What have you seen, David?
Yeah, I think, well, we've seen the recent ransomware attacks on Garmin and also Carlson Wagonlit, and then the social engineering attack on Twitter. And those are some really high profile examples of very sophisticated attacks. But in addition, there's been some significant increases in spear phishing attacks. Since the pandemic began, you have COVID-19 related themes that are trying to use social engineering to attack individual users. And I think the net of it here is that COVID-19 really accelerated this remote work and digital transformation in such a sudden and dramatic way that it's shifted also cybersecurity priorities. We now have to just handle the immediate needs of, we've got people working remotely. They have to be able to access the things they need and get set up to work. So there's maybe just these additional stresses that are there where we're not as vigilant as we need to be. And so this changing threat landscape is going to keep evolving. It's really where we have to stay vigilant and respond.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to be getting out of this anytime soon. So, and then Allan, have you seen anything change with COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. And just what was said before, a lot of those same points. People are working from home now. And I mentioned earlier the increase in attack vectors now because everybody is working from home. The phishing awareness, so that we talked about a moment ago in the earlier question, phishing has increased dramatically. And in some of my lunch and learns, I've shown actual real world examples of actual phishing attempts on myself and showing some of the different abnormalities of those emails and how they were spotted. But password fraud being right up on the list, as well as just awareness of people working from home. They need to, like you said, have that understanding of security, why it's important, because now if we've got my little boy coming in wanting to install Pokemon Go maps on my laptop, I need to be able to understand that, yeah, that's probably not a good idea. And there's a lot of risks to our corporate environment now from the home that weren't there before. There's new entry points, and a lot of them were implemented very hastily. So new VPN solutions, VDI implementations, and other methods for getting to our internal data from outside the organization. And a lot of those were implemented with operations in mind, of people being able to get back to work quickly, but security not being at the top of mind when they implemented those. So it's kind of coming as an afterthought.
And I want to pull together a little bit what Tony was saying, and Allan, I love the idea of the lunch and learn. And, you know, we're building this culture. And one of the things that, and it can't just be once a year. You can't just check a box, oh, we've done security, we're good to go. What we're going to start doing in our company is we're 31 people strong, and we're going to sort of create our own individual groups. We're going to have 5 or 6 groups of people. And once a week, they're going to watch one of our videos in our paid training together at lunch, and then talk about it. So you're not just sitting there by yourself, clicking a video, and it's very passive, but it's something that people do once a week, maybe once every other week, depending on what's going on in grant season and all. But I think it's got to be just part of our culture, and it's not a one and done kind of thing, because especially with the new threats, I don't know about you all, but I've been getting a ton of text messages related to COVID and voting and click here and all, you know, so there is an increase for sure in traffic. All right, so let's go to this one. Oh, and David, did you want to talk? Oh, we had you talk about COVID-19, sorry. All right, so this one's for Tommy. How do you see increased work from home impacting the security decisions around insider threat that companies are making? And what should security teams look for in order to protect on and off the network?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and kind of plays into some things we've already discussed. I think security teams globally are having to reassess their security posture in this work from home climate. As we mentioned before, now we're dealing with untrusted networks, untrusted devices. In some cases, companies couldn't ramp up fast enough, so I'm being required to use my personal device to do corporate related activities. So the visibility into things like your data handling activities and being able to quickly identify users that are not protected by corporate perimeter anymore, now they're at home, is key in understanding where your risk is going to be. So if I know that the bulk of my population is going to be working from home, they're all going to be on untrusted networks, maybe even untrusted devices, I need to understand what kind of data are they handling, how are they sharing it back and forth, and is it appropriate or not, right? So being able to address that with some solution like Code 42, which gives you that deeper visibility into where data is coming and going, and then obviously being able to quickly identify those users that are highest risk.
Great point. Tony, I want to ask you, have you seen any specific requirements or trends to further secure the endpoint coming from customers during the pandemic?
Yes, absolutely. And let me come to that in just a moment. One thing I think we're all talking about here, we're talking about the malicious threats. I think we all forget to mention, we all forget that cybercrime's a business. Yeah. And unfortunately, this business has adapted really quickly through this pandemic, yeah, to actually attack us in different ways. And cyber criminals will use whatever they can to come after us. So interestingly, you know, I've asked our sales teams and engineering teams, you know, what are we seeing coming from customers? And there's 2 key things that we're seeing as a trend coming from our customers about the endpoint. One is web filtering. And I think that's something that we don't tend to think of when we're on the network in the office. You know, the web filtering is probably done by some gateway device, but depending on how you've configured things, once you take that laptop home, your actual web browsing may be going through your local network, yeah, and out. So companies are wanting to push policy down to the endpoint and not rely on the corporate network. And the other one is encryption. Yeah, because a lot of people did take desktops home, and a lot of laptops and other devices were not encrypted. So there's this huge now push to encrypt everything at the endpoint. So we're seeing those 2 trends with our customers.
Right. Is there anybody who didn't talk about COVID impact and would like to share something? All right, great. I'm going to move on now. This one's for Bob. What capacity is required to adequately protect an organization's data as we look ahead over the next several years?
Yeah, I think I think, the first 90 to 120 days, the majority of organizations, in response to COVID, did what they needed to do to increase their VPN capacity, bring users back to the data center to consume the security from the security stack at the data center, et cetera. But I think as we look forward, more and more organizations are thinking more about their long-term strategy. And from a Forcepoint perspective, there are really two important components of that. The first is enabling a more risk-adaptive approach, as we've already discussed. Risk is not static, so you need to be able to provide a risk-adaptive approach at the user level across the board to all your users. And it helps you avoid creating friction across the rest of the organization. So that's the first important piece. The second piece is being able to provide a platform capability that starts to integrate multiple security disciplines into a platform that's consumable in a cloud or a SASE-based model that makes it easier for security teams to be able to have security, follow the user and the data regardless of where it is. So think about a world where users can consume the security services they need without a very heavy endpoint or heavy agent on the endpoint, but be able to consume those from a SASE model or cloud-based model as they work from their home or from their cars or from their hotel. That's the way of the future, and that's the capability that Forcepoint is providing today and will continue to evolve as we go forward.
Thank you. Tommy, if someone in a company doesn't have an insider threat program already up and running, what would you suggest?
Yeah, actually, when it comes to addressing an insider threat program, I look at it as, actually Code 42 looks at it as 4 distinct phases. One, you've got to acknowledge that you have a problem. And so many organizations that we work with either fail to admit that they have a problem with insider threat, or they've just accepted that as a normal cost of doing business, right? I expect data to walk out of my environment, around departing employees, for example, right? So acknowledging that there is a problem. Second phase would be, taking inventory, taking stock of your people, process, and technology, understanding where your gaps are, right? Do I have the right resources available to support an insider threat program? Is my technology stack valid, right? Does it support an insider threat approach for the data visibility side of things? Are my processes available to support work from home, right? Acceptable use policies and being updated. When you think about your third phase, obviously acknowledging the gaps, understanding where your gaps are, and then filling those gaps either with additional resources, additional technology. And then fourth and final phase is adoption of that technology. So many times I've experienced customers that have had half-baked projects where they had noble reasons for starting an initiative, but due to complexity, due to time, due to whatever circumstances might evolve, it's ended up in a half-baked state that's not fully adopted as part of a larger security strategy. So understanding all of those phases is helpful in addressing and adapting to an insider threat program.
Yeah, I think CISOs are constantly putting out fires. And so, if they're doing that, it's hard to do that long range planning. It's certainly something I think that they struggle with on a daily basis when you're being pulled over here and you've got to pay attention to that right now or your company's in trouble. How do you take the time? Oh, let's sit back now and talk about our insider threat program. It takes some effort and they've got to make the conscious decision to do it. Thank you. And then David, something that's really near and dear to my heart. I have spent the past 12 years preaching multi-factor authentication and working with some great folks around the country. How does it help defend against human errors and insider threats? Let's give another pitch for the importance of multi-factor authentication, because we can never say it enough.
Yeah, thanks, Kristin. Yeah, multi-factor authentication, it's one of the most important things you can do to prevent unauthorized logins. And it's something we should all be using. If you don't already have it enabled, take the time to do it. It's just a security best practice that we need to be doing. So when you require that additional factor of authentication of something you have, which is typically your smartphone, that's going to just prevent a wide variety of attacks, whether it's spear phishing or credential stuffing, or even a man-in-the-middle attack where somebody sniffed your username password. They still can't log into your account because they don't have that second factor. And so even if you're compromised, you're still going to be able to retain control of your account. You can go in and reset your password. And in that way, MFA is just really effective against preventing these unauthorized logins. Now, the trade-off, of course, is that it adds a bit of friction to the user login experience. You got to grab your phone. You got to, maybe type in a code. So smartphones are ubiquitous. And if you enable MFA with an app that has, say, push notification, authenticator, that's a very reasonable trade-off for this essential protection at this point. So with Auth0, we make configuring MFA for your application really straightforward for the developers. The entire MFA experience can be customized. And it's really all about being able to trust but verify your users. and protect against these attacks.
Yeah, and I think 5-6 years ago, MFA was a little bit of friction, but companies have made such strides. It's way more friction to have an intrusion or a cyber threat make it through. It's way more intrusion to be a victim of cybercrime than it is to have MFA. You know, my goal is that it starts to become opt-out instead of opt-in. And so I'm trying to start a hashtag require 2FA or require MFA. We have to get to a point where we stop talking about how much it helps and just make it happen. And so I'm excited to hear that you're working on that. Tony,
Agreed.
cybersecurity awareness training, you know, we talked about it should be done more than, you know, once a year, but how do you at ESET talk about using awareness training as a tool?
Well, so interestingly, I think when everybody moved home, I think, you know, their security environment changed. So you don't have the person walking behind your desk. You know, you might click on something at home that you wouldn't click on in the office. So actually having that more frequent, I think, is really important. And actually at this moment in time, I'd say probably every 3 to 4 months, but also make sure it's customized to the remote working environment, that it's not just the corporate cybersecurity awareness package. Make sure you're looking at their home environment. You know, in their home office, is Alexa behind them, and are they having a confidential conversation? Is Alexa listening? Yeah. So, you know, not only include their work environment and the standard phishing things and all the things we normally think about, but actually broaden it and make it adapted to their remote environment. And at ESET, what we did early on in this pandemic was actually customized a set of remote working cybersecurity awareness training, and we made it free. So anybody can come and actually step through that training because we just want everybody to be safe.
Yeah, I do see a lot of that happening where people are putting out free tools right now to help with the work from home and the COVID. It really is being in the cybersecurity world, you do see a lot of collaboration, even from competitors. So, you know, we have fierce competitors on our board, and they work together because we all are in this one together. So is there anything else on security awareness training that anybody wanted to talk about, or 2FA or multi-factor?
I'll just say that the discussion that you both had about multi-factor made me think of how many keystroke loggers must be installed on people's personal computers that they're now using for corporate purposes. So just again, it highlights the importance now more than ever of making sure you've got that MFA in place to help combat those computers that may have already been compromised with keystroke loggers.
Well, and what we find, go ahead, Tom.
Well, I'd just like to add one thing in there as well of make sure that actually the multi-factor authentication you're using is app-based. Don't rely on SMS-based MFA, because SIM swapping is becoming a real big issue, where somebody socially engineers the carrier shop to reissue your SIM. And if that happens, actually you've just lost your token, and the cyber criminal now has your phone number. So make sure it's app-based rather than SMS-based.
Yeah, and have you found, Tony, that that's more for high value targets, or would that just be for the general public that has to worry more about that?
Actually, it's the general public. It's part of identity theft. If a cyber criminal can steal your phone, they can walk into a bank branch and have them reissue an ATM card, because they'll send the code over SMS to the phone as an authenticator at the counter. So it's both corporately and personally.
Good point. Tommy, were you trying to jump in there?
I was just going to, you know, kind of accent some areas that I think, you know, from an MFA perspective, when we think about the friction of old, right, the old days of having to have something I have, something I know, I think one of the reasons why we're seeing some of that friction get smoothed over is not only are we talking about evolution of technology, but also the consumerism behind it. More and more consumer-related applications are requiring multi-factor, or at least offering multi-factor. So people are getting more and more familiar and more used to that approach, to where it's becoming almost a natural thing. Why would I ever sign up for something that doesn't have a multi-factor option for me, right? That puts me in a more risky state. And so I think consumers are helping this process as well, right, as we continue to evolve.
Yeah, and I would love to do some research with consumers that says, yes, I would rather have the friction of 2FA than having my personal email hacked and, you know, my accounts taken over and the keylogger put on my machine. So, you know, I think we need to change that conversation and start talking about people want to be protected, and they look to the technology companies to protect them. And did anybody stop banking because banks required 2FA? I don't know anybody, you know. So will people stop using email if we have multi-factor on there? I doubt it, you know. So yeah, thank you. I want to make sure that we take one more round here. We'll have everybody just a couple minutes of parting words, maybe more like 1 minute. Tony, how would you like to sign off today?
Well, as I just said, cybersecurity awareness training is super important, but don't forget the things that are obvious. Look at everything in your environment and think about how to protect the endpoint better. Make sure that all the devices have the latest version of anti-malware software, are updated to all the different patches, etc. Our software actually looks at some of the patch levels and stuff like that. So, endpoint, secure the endpoint.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, I would just like to go back and say the security first mindset and that security first culture is really important. It has to be organizational in your personal life, organizationally, and then collaboratively amongst each other. These are just critical steps to take to implement security best practices. And if you are responsible for implementing policies and you have the option to require things like MFA and take the stronger security stance, it's worth doing for your protection.
And David, are you finding that people are becoming more okay with more security? Are we finally getting past 5 years ago to now? Do you think we're finally getting to a point where people say, "Oh yeah, I know why I have to do this"?
Yeah, I think it's not only become more widespread, but there's also some regulatory requirements that have stepped in and said you needed the additional factor authentication. That's helped these higher trust zones and customers really work to implement this. And with like what Tony said, with the apps that are there and with the push notification, the friction has gone down and people have learned the new behavior, so it's not cumbersome anymore.
Bob, what would you like to send us off with?
Just, once again, risk is not something that is static, right? And I think historically over the years, we've tried to implement static types of policies and products to solve some of the security challenges. So I think, my message to everyone is to really start looking at more of a behavior-centric or a risk-adaptive approach, where you can adapt the level of security based on the level of risk at any given time.
And you're talking about different endpoints, different roles within a company, different departments.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely. It's just extremely dynamic, especially given the environment that we're in right now. So, a static approach is not something that that we think is going to be something that's successful in the future. So, got to start thinking more dynamically.
Yeah. The whole workforce has just become more diverse from even just an endpoint perspective. Absolutely. Tommy, how about you?
Yeah, so I just wanted to, in parting thought, when we think about insider threat and the risk to the organization, it's not always about the malicious user. I know we like to put a lot of emphasis on intent, right? I'm intending to move data out inappropriately, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact of not only accidental exposure, but also something as simple as departing employees, the offboarding process. I like to throw out some stats. 75% of employees that were surveyed have admitted to taking data with them when they left an organization. And I like to think the other 25% are just flat out lying to us, right? Everyone's done it, doesn't mean it's right, but that's one more major vector of data exfiltration is when your employees leave the organization. So having some solution like Code 42 that can provide you visibility, not only to the current data handling activities, but also historical activities to give you some context whether you have an issue or not. So. Great point,
yeah. Allan, how about you?
Yep, so I think the main thing is just making a plan and sticking to it. In a lot of cases, these plans should probably take a risk-based approach. I know that's been mentioned a couple of times. The idea is we want to mitigate the most risk with the least amount of effort. Things like moving to least privilege on our endpoints, providing credential boundaries in our environment and our critical infrastructure. There's a lot of different strategies we should take, but we need to have a plan. Because as mentioned before, it's not just a project. It's an ever-evolving program that needs to change with the times.
Yeah, and everybody has a role to play. With Cybersecurity Awareness Month, it used to be the theme was our shared responsibility. We all have a role to play, regardless of where you are in the organization. And now even your family has a role to play if you're working from home. So we have another whole subset of people we have to educate. It has really been a pleasure to speak with all of you. And I want to remind folks that they can go to the exhibitor booths if they want to continue having questions with this very talented group and learn even more. And it's been a pleasure to be a part of the Cyber Summit USA today. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristin.
Thanks, everybody.